And joining me now are former New Jersey Governor Christine Todd Whitman, Fernand Amandi, Democratic pollster, and Dr. Lipi Roy, internal medicine physician. Thank you all for being here. And, Governor Whitmer, I want to start with you because, I understand why Kristi Noem sees it as good politics to let people live their lives party hardy into the pandemic. If you die, you die, but go ahead and have fun now. It's short-term. It's sort of short-term fun for long-term pain, right? So Governor, I want to show you the opposite of that. The hard way to do it is the way that the governor of New York has done it, which is to say, nope, you can't party hard into the pandemic. You have to actually make some sacrifices. Here's the reaction in Staten Island at one bar in Staten Island that declared itself an autonomous zone from state compliance. Oh, OK, so we don't have sound over it. But basically, this is Mac's Public House, and they went against the COVID restrictions. They were shut down. The owner was arrested. You can see the size of this protest and people without masks screaming, open the bar, open up New York, demanding that the restrictions end. That's the unpopular route. But New York is actually seeing the benefit of doing the unpopular thing by seeing the death rate go down. If you were still in charge of in the state of New Jersey and things like that were happening, how do you balance that out? People want their businesses open. They want their gym open. They worked hard to build this bar. They want it to be open. But letting people do what they want leads to people being dead.
Absolutely. And, the tragedy here is if the president had taken this virus seriously at the beginning and laid out the basics that need to happen in order to get it under control or to try to flatten that curve, we would be far ahead of where we are now. He didn't, and it makes it extremely difficult for governors like Governor Cuomo to shut things down because you've got the president saying don't do it, and you've got, as you pointed out, the other Republican acolyte governors. They're not all Republican governors are doing it. Larry Hogan in Maryland is very strong on trying to protect his people. It's mindless. I mean, yes, you can have your freedom to run around without a mask, but you'd risk not only getting yourself sick, but getting others sick. It's a kind of lack of acknowledgement that you have a responsibility to others. And that's what's so sad about this. But I'm looking forward to when Joe Biden takes the oath of office, and he's going to ask all of us to wear masks for 100 days, not forever, 100 days. There are still going to be people who aren't going to do it, but it needs to be enforced.
But Governor Whitman, when you run for governor, when you're governor of a state, you have a fiduciary duty, don't you, to your constituents to keep them alive? Is that duty yes, outweighed by the desire to keep them happy? Which is the bigger duty?
To keep them alive. There's no question about it, because the other half of that is that if you take the actions early enough on, and if we had had a consistent message from the White House, we could have kept businesses open. We didn't have to go through what we're going through now. And perhaps the worst thing for particularly a small business is to open only to be told they have to close again when they stock up and they get things in expecting to be able to sell these things, and then they have to close down again. So it's put us in a very difficult position where people are neither enjoying themselves because they're losing their jobs and their homes and they're scared about the future, nor are they staying healthy. It's the worst of both worlds right now.
Yeah, and Fernand, as a former Floridian, I'm horrified and scared for all of you and all of my friends like yourself who still live in the state of Florida, because you kind of have the worst of both worlds. Like, we know that there's this culture that's developed in the Republican Party around standing up. It's sort of this macho thing where we don't wear masks, we don't lock down, we just show up at the bar to just own the libs. You have these young Republicans stage a secret gala just to celebrate that they're going to macho up against the COVID, against coronavirus, and then they end up in the ER and are demanding to be the first one to get a ventilator, right? You have the governor of Florida fighting mayors. You had the mayor of Miami Beach, Dan Gelber, write a letter to DeSantis that was published on November 18th saying this isn't working. It's unmistakably clear that Florida's approach to managing this pandemic is failing horribly. I believe your approach is neither saving lives nor livelihoods. While DeSantis, rather than worry about his people staying alive, is telling Donald Trump, fight on against the election. to try to, urging him to keep fighting about the election. It's like he doesn't care whether his people live or die as long as Disney World stays open. I don't get it. How are Floridians reacting to this governor's attitude toward them?
Well, Joy, I mean, the sane Floridians are horrified. The mind reels at seeing this behavior. And I wish it were just limited to Florida. I mean, if it was just a Florida GOP problem, we can go to some of the other states. But this is just endemic of a party that over the last 4 years proved to be openly hostile to American democracy, but they are now openly hostile to American life. I mean, if this were a relationship, for example, if you were involved in a relationship with the Republican Party, a judge would issue a restraining order and the police would probably file charges for attempted murder, if not manslaughter, because we're seeing people pay the price with their lives. And one also has to ask themselves, what sort of precedent are we creating here with this no common good, no mask policy? Can people all of a sudden walk into restaurants in Florida and decide for the hell of it they're going to start smoking, despite regulations that say you can't smoke in public restaurants because personal freedom own the libs? What message is this communicating not only to Floridians who have to bear the brunt of this, but around the world? It's horrifying, Joy. And I remember, saying on your former show, AM Joy, when talking about this, it sounded hyperbolic at the time. But I said the Republican Party is akin to a domestic terror organization and how they're acting and the conduct of their policies and how that conduct of its policies impact lives. There are people paying for their lives now. How is this not the actions of a group that is hostile to American life? It's horrifying. And unfortunately, for another 47 days, I'm not sure what the solution is except stay alive.
That's how I feel, too, that literally it's as if, Dr. Roy, Republican governors are conducting in real time what Scott Atlas was just talking about. They're conducting an experiment to see if they can just develop herd immunity in their own states. They're saying the most important thing is that people's bars and restaurants get to be open. All the kids must go to school, not can go to school, but must go to school. And also their parents must be able to go and eat indoors in a restaurant. So you're just piling up the threat level. And when you sort of go and sort of lurk onto conservative, Twitter, those who are not on Parler, who are still on Twitter, they'll say, well, Sweden did it. Sweden did it that way. Sweden didn't have lockdown. Sweden doesn't have mask orders. And look, Sweden got away with it. But Sweden right now is in the midst of a COVID crisis. They're having like an actual catastrophic crisis because they did that. So we've seen that open the state, open the country thing happen in real time. And it's a disaster. How do you talk people out of it when they believe in their head that if you just let everybody get sick, everyone will be okay?
Good evening, Joy. So good to see you. And I'm honored to be on this panel. This is why data matters. This is why information matters, and speaking clearly and honestly matters. Our leaders really need to take on the role of being leaders. It's kind of like when you're a parent, if you want to be the fun parent and let your kid just eat candy and chocolate and donuts all day, yeah, the kid's going to think you're the best friend, right? But a parent's job is not to be their child's best friend. If you want to actually have your child thrive and survive and do well, you have to be disciplined. These leaders, particularly Governors DeSantis, Governor Noem, they are not following the evidence-based guidelines, recommendations that are going to keep people safe. We have more than enough data now, Joy, to show that this simple little mask can actually save lives. We have data showing that states that have mandated masks have far fewer cases. I'm glad you cited New York State, Joy. So I've been living in New York City since the start of the pandemic. I was here during that hellish period in April, actually, when we had over 1,000 people die in one 24-hour period. And Governor Cuomo made the very difficult decision to shut down. I mean, in New York City, New York State, where there's Broadway, restaurants, museums, Yankee Stadium. I mean, so much shut down. People, yes, lost their jobs. It was very difficult. But you know what? It happened because it was the one thing to do in order to save lives. When you're in the midst of an infectious disease outbreak, we have decades, actually centuries of data showing that lockdown is what saves lives. Again, we're thankfully now opening up, but he followed public health measures. That's what needs to happen, Joy.
And you know, Fernand, I can see Ron DeSantis and Kristi Noem running as a ticket in 2024 on this, because it's clear that the public is teaching Republican leaders that it's okay to sit on 250,000, 270,000 bodies and people don't care, or they just don't believe the bodies are real. I worry that this is becoming the new politics of the Republican Party.
Joy, you know, this is the most horrifying thing of all. You just touched on it. I mean, if there were no constituency for this madness, you know, we'd at least be able to trust in our fellow Americans. I'm afraid, deathly afraid, that the weaponization of these policies and how they've become politically tribal issues might mean that they have support. You know, I think, unfortunately, if Ron DeSantis were on the ballot this past November here in our state of Florida, inexplicably, despite the fact that he's overseen this malevolent response where tens of thousands of Floridians have caught in the virus unnecessarily and perished from it, he would have won re-election. So we get the government we deserve. This is as much an American populist problem as an American leadership problem.
It absolutely is. It's terrifying. Governor Christie, Todd, Whitman, Fernand, Amandi, Dr. Lipi Roy, stay safe. Thank you all very much. And up next on the ReidOut, the two parties bring out their biggest stars to try and sway Georgia voters, with the runoff election now just a month away.
The promise of the Biden presidency and the Harris vice presidency rests in part on their ability to have a cooperative posture with Congress. And to do that, we have to have the two gentlemen who are running for Senate in Georgia.
And one of those two gentlemen, Jon Ossoff, joins me next. And where's the outrage? Nearly 3,000 deaths a day, nearly 9 million more people out of work compared to a year ago. And what are Republicans focused on? Election conspiracy fantasies. Larry Wilmore will be here to talk about that and much more. The ReidOut continues after this.